and a friend were deciding, do we go to a job fair? Well, I was thinking, do I go to a job fair or do I go back to Vietnam where I used to live and start a project? And I went with the second option, right? So myself and my friend who worked in a university in Vietnam, in tertiary education, we kind of had 4 questions that we kept coming back to when we chatted about learning. How do we develop critical thinking and problem solving skills?
Scarlett, by the way.
In a web-enabled world, in a world where the internet is there. This is our focus. This is just the thing that's sort of the disruptor. We thought, what can we do with that? And I'm sure that's a question a lot of us are thinking, right? This was a bit different. How do we bridge formal and informal learning? I was sort of seeing the co-curricular things I was involved in as a curriculum coordinator in some ways more interesting than the stuff that was happening. So how do we bridge that? And how do we get people who are learning online, maybe in places where they're not in schools like this, how do we get them working with people in schools like this, right? So that's basically that one. This is the other one. How do we get companies, development organizations who want to work with our students, how do we get them working with them rather than talking at them? Right, which tends to happen. You get people in and then they kind of talk at the kids. How do we get them learning together, right? So we started a consultancy. We did kind of different projects, more just straight consultancy stuff, but we really were looking at building some sort of bigger project that would harness those ideas. So we developed this, the Learning Network. And in our research, we discovered the work Mozilla were doing in digital badges, which is really interesting. Some of you might know about it. They had the same sort of thing. How can we recognize informal learning? And it's just about online learning. If you look at the background to it, it's like there's stuff happening in after-school clubs, and online forums, and all sorts of different contexts. Learning is just not happening. It's happening all over the place. But how can we find a way for kids and adults to get that learning recognised in the non-traditional ways, right? So they're looking for people to create badges. And so NASA are creating badges, Pixar are creating badges, but then small startups like ourselves are also creating badges. So that's what we've basically worked on while we balance our consultancy work, and I still teach, I still work at UNIS part-time and sub and stuff, right? So we developed 4 badges harnessed on this website, which you can go and have a look at if this triggers your interest. The idea is that the students can bring their interest to your projects, but there's still a structure. The tools I always loved as a teacher are ones that there is a structure, there is something there to give me a spine for my learning and for my planning, but that the students bring their interest to it. So we're hopeful that our tool does that, and we're just trialling it at the moment, so it'll need tweaked and developed. There's 4 badges. The first one's like an introduction. They develop their own space. They must have their own blog. They're not on our system. They've only got a profile in our system. Their blog is theirs, and that's very much my approach to blogging. It's their space. They develop it. They look after it. They curate it. This next one is their first big project they do individually. They take on a challenge developed by one of our partner organizations, and they research it, and it could take a year. It could take 6 weeks. It depends on the context in which the learning is happening. They then, once they've researched and they've got something to say, then they tell their digital story. So it could be a film, could be a website, could be a talk, which they record and post on their blog. Then they do the same thing again. Again, it could take 4 weeks in a unit in class, or it could be after school for a year, right? Or it could be a summer program, right? But that one must be done in a team. And the collaboration element is not, again, one of my frustrations in schools. Collaboration is sort of incidental to summative assessment. Why is that? Why do we talk about collaboration but we never assess it? It's always like maybe a comment on a report card. So it's a core part. They must collaborate, take the skills they've learned in the individual challenge and bring it to the collaborative challenge. Then we have a mentoring badge, which is really aimed at the teachers. So they make a digital story as a way of getting used to our approach to project-based learning. And they can also create challenges and feed into our network. And this one is particularly giving us the bridge into Vietnamese schools. So we want to work with schools, and we'll work with any school. And that's part of what we hope will be interesting about our network. It won't just be schools of a certain type, it will be schools from all different contexts. We're testing it at the moment with a school in California who have a tech team thing called Mouse Squad. And they were looking for something, so their kids go and do, like, problem solving for the teachers, tech things, right? They're a help desk. but they also wanted to teach them digital literacy, critical thinking, problem solving. So they saw our thing and said, can we help to trial your network? Brilliant. So they're great because those kids are pretty savvy, and then we're dialoguing with them to improve it, to develop it, and then we'll be ready to work with more schools. And obviously we'll have to kind of check out the website, because at the moment we've built the website ourselves with a little bit of help, but it'll need to be a little bit more sort of pulled out and developed to be able to cope with a lot of schools. Really, that just reiterates some of the things I said. Yeah, and these are the organisations, or the idea of, we built using open educational resources supplied by Mozilla. And if you don't know, Mozilla is a really interesting organisation. I didn't know much about them before this project. But yeah, they developed this informal learning kind of badge system that we've built on. Development organisations have given us challenges. Companies have given us a couple of challenges. And then the student, obviously, and us. So it's like a partnership idea. Yeah, so the idea of schools could come in, already have blogs. Like I used to work at Yokohama International School, all the kids were on WordPress. They would just bring their blogs to it, right? And then the projects would go on top. Other schools might not have a kind of standard digital space for their students, so we can help them through that, and the badges guide them through that. So we're thinking for Vietnamese schools, when we get to work with them, we'll do a lot of work early on with them as they kind of get the students familiar with the way of working and our way of thinking, and then they'll be more in a stage to collaborate with the schools that are more familiar with that. And the same for the teachers. Some teachers are blogging, tweeting, making stories, some not so much.
Okay, that is the end of
that is my details. I don't have many cards left, but feel free to take the last couple. Thanks for listening.